All right. Well, welcome to another Shock Week. This is Shock Week 2025, Derek.
Wow.
This is unbelievable. I can't believe it is. I can't believe it's 2025, but it's Shock Week again. This is the last week of May, and I've got the one and only Derreck Vigstol. And last time we did this, Derek, you were here in the studio.
I was. So I'm getting a little home away from homesick here, seeing the guitars on the wall and I remember the basement very well, very well.
Yep. So why don't we do this, because there's probably some individuals who are watching now that didn't watch last year. Why don't you do and give us an introduction of who Derreck Vigstol is?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity. And Derreck Vigstol, I work for eHazard. We are primarily an electrical safety consulting company. My background is in electrical construction. I'm journeyman master electrician in the state of Minnesota, and got into teaching a little bit. And from there, my career just kind of took off, made it out to NFPA, worked as a staff liaison, the electrical technical lead for NFPA, and then also ended up there right up until COVID time as the senior electrical content specialist for NFPA, where basically I did anything that had electrical in the title of it for NFPA. I had something to do with it as far as the products coming out of NFPA, not the standards development, but the products. So I did a lot of the trainings and all of that stuff, certifications. I supported those efforts that NFPA is making. And then during COVID, I said, you know what, I want to get back into teaching. So I knew eHazard was doing their thing quite a bit on the safety instruction and safety training side. So I called up my good friend Hugh Hoagland at eHazard and said, hey, could you give me some training? And he said, boy, could we. And he wasn't kidding. I do a lot of training on electrical safety every year. Now, actually, it's shifting into more of the maintenance space as well. So I'm getting into training on maintenance.
And hence the reason for our discussion today, which our focus is going to be on maintenance. And I remember the last time you and I chatted for Shock Week, we did the electrical safety plan, right? And we went through all of those different, and I remember we were here till like midnight because I didn't realize it went to like K, L, M, N. It was insane. But this is a good session because it's similar to our discussion in 70E, which I would encourage everybody to go and watch that series of videos. 70B is very similar to 70E, isn't it, in how we employ it in developing
as far as the kind of structure, well, I mean, they're different style manuals, so they look a little bit different when you read them, but the concepts within are very similar, and how they are applicable to a place of employment or a workplace is very, very similar, and you can't really have one effectively without the other. I mean, I can't do maintenance right if I'm not following safe work practices, and my safe work practices don't work right if I haven't done proper maintenance.
That's exactly
so they're very, very tied together.
Yeah, and then so what 70E was, in our discussion on 70E last year, we walked through the safety plan because 70E requires you to create a safety plan, and 70E has the ingredients for the safety plan. 70B is very similar, right? 70B has the ingredients for a maintenance plan.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Right. And the requirement to say, okay, if you own electrical equipment, you have to maintain it, and you have to do that in accordance with a written maintenance program.
Okay, so who has the responsibility for the maintenance plan? Is it the owner of the like if this was TD, this is TD Enterprises, and I own the house, and well, my wife owns the house, right? She's the boss, so she's the AHJ. But we own this structure, and I guess I would be responsible for the maintenance of everything in the structure.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So if an entity owns the building and they own all the electrical equipment in there, they have the responsibility to make sure that that equipment is getting maintained. Now, they don't necessarily have to be the ones that do the maintenance on it.
Right.
Um, there can be some things there, and consultants and contractors that can come into the fold. Maybe they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the time and resources to be able to do it, but they've got to at least make sure it's getting done.
Right. Okay, so where in 7 do you know where in 70B it tells me that it's the owner? I know in 70E it was clear. There was a section in 70E that said it was the owner's responsibility to create a safe work practices, a safety plan. There's got to be something in here that says the same thing for maintenance, right?
Believe it's in chapter 4.
Okay, so if I look at chapter 4 is your general requirements. They got 4.1 is electrical equipment has to be maintained. Oh, so it says, and I remember having this discussion. Electrical equipment has to be maintained in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. So this does not supersede. In fact, 412 says this standard is not intended to duplicate or supersede manufacturer's instructions. So that's an important thing. But where would it? There's the plan. I'm trying to find the section that says employer or owner.
Well,
Would it
I
be
don't think it's going to say employer. I
no?
believe it's going to say electrical equipment owner.
Okay. I'm going to do
Of
a
course,
quick.
now you're making me.
Oh, there it
Yeah, here we
is.
go.
Four.
4.2.1.
That's it.
Yes.
4.2.1. Yes.
Yeah. I was getting a little nervous, Tom, because I was going off my memory, and I've been doing a ton of work on this lately, and so my brain is all over the place,
Fried.
and so you said that, and I just kind of spouted off and went, oh boy,
I love
I
it.
hope my memory is as good as it used to be. But
Yes.
yes, there it is. In 4.2.1, the equipment owner shall implement and document an overall EMP that directs activity appropriate to the safety and operational risks. So what that is saying right there is that whoever owns the equipment has to draft up and implement an EMP, which stands for Electrical Maintenance Program, similar to ESP, which stood for Electrical Safety Program in 70E. This is basically saying, okay, you own an electrical equipment, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah.
You have to write a program to maintain it, and you have to oversee the fact that that gets done. Now, again, like I said, you don't necessarily have to be the one that does it, because maybe you don't
Right.
have maintenance techs or something like that. But you have to have a program that directs that and ensure it gets completed.
Okay. So I'm gonna throw you a curveball. Another curveball.
Okay.
All right. This and I just thought about this, but it says the equipment owner. So if I'm leasing equipment, and I would, where I would liken this to is if I have a generator that I lease because I brought it in for temporary power,
Yes.
or if I have a like a one of those trailers that come over with all the power equipment in it. If I'm leasing it, am I responsible for the maintenance of it, or is the actual owner who I'm leasing it from responsible of the maintenance of it?
So that is a great question, and that
I'm
you're
full
right.
of them.
That is a curveball. I got another one I can throw back your way.
Yeah,
That's even trickier. But in my experience with the companies that do rent that type of equipment out,
yeah,
they typically do have people who are following a maintenance schedule out in the field to go out and service this, because really their responsibility to their end customer, who is the entity who's leasing this temporary generator, is to ensure that that generator continues to work, right?
that's right.
Because if I'm leasing a generator from a company and it stops working because they haven't maintained it, well, then my checkbook closes up. So it's
I like the way you
it's
put that.
it
My checkbook closes up. I
it's
love it.
it's really in the rental company's best interest to be doing the maintenance, and I would say they, in this instance, they are the equipment owner.
That's right.
Now, here, I'll throw you my curveball.
Yeah.
So property management companies, a
Oh, I
lot of
never thought
a
about
lot of
that.
times they won't own the building, And
Yeah.
neither will so the client who's maybe occupying the building will hire this property management company to manage the building, but it's some private equity
Oh,
firm that owns the
man.
actual building and owns the equipment.
Wow. So
And that
so
one I don't have an answer for you on.
yeah,
That one I don't know.
somebody has to have somebody has to have the responsibility for the maintenance program. So I guess
Yeah.
what you're saying is, let's say that, for example, let's take this house. Let's say that I own this house, and we buy another one and we're living somewhere else. And you say, "Hey, Tom, I'm going to lease the house from you." And you come over and you say open up a little business, and you're doing your wife does the t-shirts and all that good
Yep.
stuff, and hopefully we'll have Shock Week t-shirts, which I got some t-shirts around here somewhere that she sent me. Um, so you opened up this business. Now you don't own the building or the equipment that's in here. I technically own it, but I'm leasing it to you. So I would think that the landlord, it goes back to the landlord, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely does in that instance, but in my hypothetical, there's an added kind of spin to it because the landlord actually is just a private investor firm, and they
Right.
aren't really actively, and they've leased it to another company who leased it out even one
Wow.
step further. So so there's like 4 degrees of separation here, and
Sure.
or probably the more common situation is, we have a real estate investment fund
Mhm.
owns the building, then say a company like, well, let's say a big bank like Citibank or something like that rents out the actual building.
Right.
Now the client or the tenant doesn't own the building, doesn't own the equipment, and then they go on even further to hire the property management company to manage the building.
Oh, yeah.
And and at that level, it's now all of a sudden we have a big pocket on um, who has responsibility for ensuring that gets done. Now, per this requirement, the owner of the building, the owner of the equipment, is still that private investment firm. So, per how this is written, they would have ultimate responsibility to provide this maintenance program. But I can guarantee you that that's never going to happen, and their expectations are probably, we leased it to this entity who is occupying the building, and it would really be their responsibility to make sure that the stuff um, gets done the way it's supposed to.
Right. Right. Now I'm looking at the next edition because 70B is in process. And
Yes.
the first draft, they didn't change. Now they moved some things around. They got rid of the section that says this standard is not intended to duplicate or supersede manufacturer's instructions in 4.1.2. I gotta look and see why they did that or where they put it, because they probably just moved it. But in 4.2.1, they made changes to this, and it says the equipment owner shall implement and document an EMP, not an overall. They got rid of the word overall,
Yeah.
that directs activity. And instead of appropriate to the safety and operational risk, they said activity for the maintenance of equipment, included in the EMP. So they still have the equipment owner in there, and based on our discussion right now, in most cases it's probably clear cut who owns the
Right.
equipment. But there are those
Yeah.
conditions and those situations where someone's going to have to pay attention, because that electrical equipment doesn't know who owns it, and it doesn't care
Right.
who owns it.
No, it doesn't.
Those little electrons aren't that smart. So they do a lot of work, but they're just not that smart.
Well, and one thing that keeps popping up actually in the work I've been doing is there's a lot of insurance companies out there now that are really going to their customers and saying, "Hey, what are you doing for compliance to this
Mm,
this 70B standard with maintenance?" Because when
yeah.
when you're in the insurance world, your main concern is what is the risk?
Oh, yeah.
What
It's
is
all
the
about
risk?
risk.
And they didn't, the insurance company isn't necessarily staying all up to date on codes and standards worlds. That's where you and I play because we're code nerds,
Yep.
right? So the insurance company all of a sudden gets this memo saying, "Hey, there's a new standard for electrical equipment maintenance." And all of a sudden, it's a big hot button item for insurance companies because they're getting educated on, well, shoot, not maintaining my electrical equipment puts it at a much higher risk
Risk.
of failure, and
Absolutely.
puts my employees working in that facility at a much higher risk of injury from failure due to that electrical equipment. So the insurance
Mhm.
companies are jumping on it and pointing people right to this section saying, look, you own stuff. It is your responsibility to come up with a plan on how we keep that safe. And I've even talked to some people who own electrical equipment that have said their insurance company said they're going to be dropped if they don't come up with a plan for compliance to 70B.
Really? Wow.
Yes, they're really putting their feet down on this one and saying, you got to get this done. I really wish the insurance industry would take that approach with 70E as well. But
Yeah.
we'll take
Well,
small wins. We'll take what we can
yeah,
get.
and I would argue that if out of 70E and 70B and 70, right, installation
Yes,
requirements are adopted and they're enforced. 70E, I would argue OSHA has that hook into 70E in that OSHA will enforce and enforce their laws, but they'll use 70E as the example. There's nobody who is enforcing seven. There's not a 70E inspector, so to speak, unless you went and hired one on your own. There's no
right.
government one, and 70B is no different. But I like I heard about the insurance companies paying interest or being very interested in 70B, and I think, in my opinion, it's probably because of the amount of damage. I don't want. There's probably a lot of insurance companies that aren't insuring for loss of life and injury. There's
Correct.
probably a lot of insurance companies that are focused on loss of property
Asset
because if
asset
y-
protection and risk management.
yes,
Yep.
yes, and 70B is about longevity of the equipment, the installation, um, the performance from a system perspective. So your business is, and there's probably insurance companies that if you go down, for example, if I have an unplanned outage and I lose $20 million in production, I'll bet you could file that on a claim to some insurance company.
Right.
I can imagine.
Well, and think of it this way too, Tom, because I think you know a little bit about the equipment manufacturing space
Hmm.
in your space, right? Well, what happens if a piece of equipment fails within the warranty period, but I
Oh
haven't
yeah,
maintained it in the way that the manufacturer told me I need to do it?
absolutely right. It's now
Right.
you're
So now
outside of the warranty.
that puts, where it would be a warranty claim that the insurance could help you with, it completely takes that out of the picture. And now the insurance company is left trying to cover this. So the insurance companies are really interested in making sure that their clients are in
Yep.
compliance with the 70B because it's just going to help to kind of lessen the risk that they're exposed to. So, I mean, it's all a money game, obviously, in the end. But as a safety nerd, I'm looking at this going, yes, finally somebody is jumping in on this and
Yep.
really creating the accountability piece, right?
Yeah.
We all knew we should be following it, but now here's an accountability piece to it because if we don't follow it, it's going to screw up with our insurance rates and then it all comes back to that almighty dollar. And if we got to drive things by the cost and use that dollar sign to drive compliance,
Yep.
I guess the ends justify the means for me because we're going to get a much better compliance rate than we have in the past.
Yeah. And unfortunately, just as, a lot of people say when it comes to these things, follow the dollar.
Yep.
Whoever is going to lose more financially is, or whoever stands to lose money, should something happen, they're going to be speaking up and saying, hey, and this is another reason to raise rates too. You could sit down and an insurance company come in and say, you don't have an electrical maintenance program. You're not implementing electrical safety. We'll still insure you, but your rates are going to be
but
much
you're going to pay
higher
for it.
than you're going to pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
Yep.
we've established who has the responsibility. It's the equipment owner. Had the discussion about enforcement too, and a little discussion on enforcement. We're in chapter 4, general requirements, and 4.2 is our, one second. Boy, my I just heard my I don't know what it is over there. It's a piece of my own equipment. I don't know if that's my refrigerator or my dehumidifier over there going, I need service. I need service.
I need maintenance. Yeah, yeah. I feel a little bad talking about this because like right when E Hazard asked me to become the 70B guy because of my background with NFPA, like I was coming home from a work trip, and when I got home from that work trip, I walk in the house and I can just smell the unconsumed fuel oil from my boiler because
Oh,
I hadn't done maintenance on it in a couple years, and the burner stopped. It burner gummed up and it stopped working. And luckily, it wasn't super cold up here in Massachusetts, but um, yeah, lack of maintenance. It
lack of
gets us.
maintenance.
I,
Absolutely. And I always try, I was just doing a 70E presentation over in New York, and we were talking about maintenance, and I said it's very similar. I mean, you wouldn't get in your car if you've never performed maintenance on your brakes and hydraulics, all that stuff that are in a vehicle.
right,
So it's no different. It's your, and you don't expect your car to last forever if you don't do maintenance on it. So
right. Well, some people do, but those people are wrong.
yeah, they learn eventually,
Yes.
eventually, hard way. So we're in section 4.2, electrical maintenance program. And do you want to do this just like we did before? We'll beat up each section.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
There's not too many sections here, so it's not an overly long discussion if we just go piece by piece.
All right. 4.2.1 is general. Says the equipment owner, which we just talked about, the equipment owner shall implement and document an overall EMP that directs activity appropriate to the safety and operational risks. So um, uh, they just changed this. 4.2.1 now says, we just read it, for the maintenance of equipment included in the EMP. All right. So, I mean, I think we beat that one up already.
Yep.
4.2.2, inspection.
Yes. So this is a big item here, because it requires the equipment owner who's going to build that electrical maintenance program to do regular inspections and go out there and take a look at their equipment and make sure, number one, it was properly installed to the codes at the time that it was installed
Installed.
at. And then number two, it's going to take a look at making sure that specific maintenance tasks for those assets have been developed and that they're actually working, right? So this is going to go, I think, hand in hand also with the maintenance condition assessment we're going to talk about in a little bit. For me, looking at how I can help my clients with maintenance issues and 70B compliance issues,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some key components. There's initial gap analysis to say, where are you at today versus where do you need to be, and look at it from that analyzing point of what you're doing for maintenance, or more accurately, probably what you're not doing for maintenance. But then there's this inspection piece to make sure that the equipment was properly installed and that it has specific maintenance procedures drafted up for it and are being utilized. And then the condition assessment, just to see, what kind of condition is this equipment in. When you bring all three of those together, you get a nice overall round look at the equipment. And as an added bonus, it helps out with your risk assessments in 70E because you have to consider the condition of maintenance in NFPA 70E when you're figuring out shock and arc flash hazards. So this is I think in my mind, this is a really critical component.
So let me ask you. I'm a stickler on words, and a lot of people get frustrated with me, but bear with me. It
Yes.
says 4.2.2 says inspection. 4.2.2.1, it says that the electrical maintenance program shall include elements to verify that the electrical equipment or systems have been inspected. So if I, and it says inspected to comply with the applicable codes and standards, installation
Correct.
codes and standards. So if I'm going to go back to my abode here, my house. If I say I have documentation that says an inspector came in this house in 2005 when it was built and inspected the house to the installation codes and standards, is that all I need? I'm done. I don't have to redo the inspection. It just says that I have to verify that the equipment or the system has been inspected. It doesn't say that I need to do it on a regular basis. It doesn't say I need to do it before I'm going to do work. It just says I have to verify that it's been inspected.
So you ever put an addition on your house?
This one, no, not me. I would never do that
No.
because then I
No.
would have to get another inspection. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's go back to let's go back to the place of employment, right? Are
Yeah.
we changing out equipment on a regular basis
I would say
or adding equipment?
let's make an
Uh,
assumption. Let's make an
yeah.
assumption that I haven't changed anything. This house has been here for 15 years. I have not added to it. I haven't subtracted from it. Nothing has changed. So this statement just says that I need to show evidence that it was inspected.
Yeah. And
It-
to comply with this statement there, I think you could go see that the sticker was there on the panel board that the inspector left or wherever they provided
If
documentation
they
that it
left
was
us, yeah,
inspected. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And I think at a bare bones kind of basic level,
yep.
compliance could meet that. Yeah. Yeah. And
Now, if that's the case, okay, 4.2.2.2 says equipment specific maintenance tasks shall be developed utilizing the information gathered during the inspection. So if it was brand new when I installed it, so here my point is, in my opinion, I think this is where my head's at, that if I am fast forward 15 years, and remember how you said we have to ascertain the condition of maintenance.
yes.
When I go around this structure and I'm going to assess my condition of maintenance and do my periodic maintenance, I'm going to want to re-verify that the installation still complies with the installation requirements because my fault currents could have gone up outside of my
Correct.
control. Um, there could have been, maybe I did not make any changes, but maybe the system changed in its operation, I guess, or some of the parameters that
Right.
now it's no longer within the installation requirements.
Right. Well, and that's why, and I'm coming at this from in my opinion anyways, how to best get this question answered for customers, right?
Sure.
So for me, and I think I'm right in the same boat with you there, Tom, about this at a bare basic minimum to comply with the words on the page there.
Yep.
Could we just verify that it was inspected and whatever information that the installation came with? I think we could. But
Yeah.
remember, I think you also hit the nail on the head about how 70B is really there's a lot in here about reliability of the system, but there's also a lot in here about reliability of the system from a safety standpoint and making sure that our equipment's going to do what it needs to do when we need it to do that thing, right?
Yep.
And so to kind of make this effective and make it be able to be implemented by somebody who is doing this maintenance thing, it has to be an ongoing conversation,
It has
right?
to. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
and and I know you're on several NFPA codes and standards committees. I think you're on all three of them, aren't you? You're on.
Yeah, so I just came off of this last edition, though the edition that's being worked on right now. I gave that to AJ Johnson to take my place because that dude is a rock star. He is down at one of our facilities in Carolinas, he's implementing 7DB. It's not his job. He's a product manager, product line manager. He's not even
But
responsible
he's just
for
doing it.
maintenance. He is all over it, and
Yeah.
I was just so impressed with his drive. I was like, some of us old farts have to just step aside for some of the younger blood to come in and get that, what do you call it, the addiction of codes and standards under their skin. So
well, well,
yeah.
well, isn't he lucky?
I know. Isn't he lucky? Exactly. All
Um,
right. So
but
4.2.2. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say. So with your work in these all three spaces, I mean, you understand the importance of tying safety and maintenance and installation all three together, and we
That's
always
right.
talk about it as it's a three-legged stool, right? If you
Yep.
take one of those pieces away from it, it'll tip over. And
Absolutely.
so this is going to be an ongoing thing, not just, yeah, sure, we might have to verify it was properly inspected at the time the installation was made, but we need to make sure that it's still in compliance with those things because stuff does change over time.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it'll tie right into that condition of maintenance assessment we're going to have to do. Yeah.
Okay, so inspection, we can leave this as you need to make sure that it was installed per the applicable installation codes and standards, regardless of when it was installed, whether it's part of the original construction or if it was added on later, it needs to be inspected. And then
Right.
whatever you can ascertain from that, and maybe your inspection um, indicates that that you have to do X, Y, and Z for maintenance. You have to take the information that you gather and leverage that in your equipment specific maintenance tasks.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yes, that's
And that's
exactly
inspection.
that's exactly how, at least my opinion, and all this stuff is pretty new yet, right? I mean,
Yep.
70B's been around for a long time, but it was a recommended practice prior to becoming a standard. And so trying to make heads or tails of this stuff, and you folks that were on the 70B committee when it shifted, I mean, you
Hmm.
guys did a ton of work and really good work, but it
It
didn't have a
was.
whole lot of eyes on it yet at that
Yep.
standpoint. So a lot of the public inputs, correct me if I'm wrong, were coming directly from committee members.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Because
so
we took existing language. We had to take all the you coulds, you shoulds, and make them you shalls.
yeah,
And in the process, we moved a bunch to the back to the annex material, to the information, and we had a lot of debates on the actual content. But to your point, it's not until you start using the document and implementing it that you start to say this doesn't make sense or this could be clearer. So we're making headway, and
right.
there were no changes for inspection in 4.2.2 for this next cycle. It is completely clean. And so what we just read and
Just what
how
it
we
was.
implement is what it was and is what it shall be. All right. Inspection. Anything else on inspection?
I don't think so because I jumped ahead a little bit on link in that I got on my other monitor here, and I'm noticing the next section is 4.2.3 condition of maintenance. So I think that
Yes.
inspection conversation we just had dovetails very nicely into what we're going to talk about next. And
Yes.
that is the EMP needs to include elements to consider the current condition of maintenance of electrical equipment and systems, as well as the potential safety and operational risks to maintenance and operational personnel. So we've got to have an element in our maintenance program to drive individuals or to drive the people who are actually implementing this maintenance program to take a look at the current condition of the equipment we have on site. So what do you think I mean,
So
what does that mean in your mind? You're an
so so
equipment guy, right?
yeah, yeah. So here's one of the things that I was just thinking about. I don't know why this popped in my head, but let's say, for example, my facility had an air compressor or a piece of equipment that, remember back in the day, I'm talking years ago, there were never any guards on those big flywheels with belts and all that, right? That piece of equipment could be in my facility and working perfectly. It could be so well oiled, it could look like the day it came off of the factory floor. But what it says in here, operational risks to maintenance and operational personnel. Do you do you think that I could leverage 4.2.3 to say, yes, it's working well, but it presents a hazard to personnel because it doesn't have the appropriate guards on it when it was manufactured, which are now required but weren't when they were manufactured? Or would that be
Right.
something totally separate?
I think that's I think
I
hmm.
think it's separate. I'm thinking it's separate.
I think it's separate too
Yeah.
because if you have equipment that's older than the requirements, I mean, you may not have the ability to get a guard for that at this
Yeah.
point.
That's right.
And so it's not so much that you had equipment that was in one condition and just over time things have gone to not ideal conditions, right? You started out in not an ideal condition on that one.
Uh,
Although I will say this, OSHA might have something to say about that.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that what my scenario, and I don't know why, in my head I pictured a factory that had all of those open belts and no guards on anything. And I think that there are other requirements that would say that may be a very well maintained piece of equipment, but it's a hazard for those who work around it. OSHA would
Right,
have other laws in place that say you need to protect and guard it. But even after you follow those, you would still perform maintenance on that to make sure that the condition of that maintenance of any electrical equipment, and I like the word systems, because we have the energy storage systems, you have your
yes,
microgrids and things like that. But it has to say it's the potential safety and operational risk to maintenance and operational personnel. So you've got to think about the maintenance of all of that equipment over its life cycle, because it could become a hazard to people and to the processes as well,
yeah.
right?
Well, and for me, what this brings immediately to mind
Hmm.
is something in 70E, normal operating condition,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And that new annex that the 2024 edition of 70E is incorporated on assessing that condition of maintenance. To
Yeah.
me, that's what this is screaming like your maintenance program, because I mean, back up to kind of what normal operating or normal operation of electrical equipment entails. We talk about it a lot of times in terms of doing things like operating the switch or operating the circuit breaker, but just that piece of electrical equipment on the
Yeah.
wall doing its thing is normal operation of that equipment. And so if it's in that normal operating condition, the risk of something happening is pretty low. But if it's not in that normal operating condition, then the risk starts to elevate. And
That's
and
right.
so I like tying that when people ask me about this and when we're building maintenance programs for folks, um, that's where I point them to is like think of normal operating condition. And so your EMP has to have an element that kind of drives you to making that assessment of your equipment.
So if to bring in that 70E reference, 110.2 is titled electrically safe work condition. And what it
Yes.
tells you is in 110.2b, when required, it tells you that energized electrical conductors and circuit parts operating at voltages greater than 50 volts shall be put into an electrically safe work condition before an employee performs work of if any of the following conditions exist. They talk about being within the approach boundary. There's one exception, and the exception says normal operation of electrical equipment is permitted where a normal operating condition exists, and they give you 7 items. All of those have to be satisfied. Proper installation is one. The equipment is properly maintained is the second one. And then the other one that has relations to maintenance is there is no evidence of impending failure, right?
Right.
But in 130, it's the I believe it's the arc flash risk assessment where there's a table
Yeah.
130.5C that says estimate of the likelihood of occurrence of an arc flash incident for AC and DC systems. And I believe in there, the operating condition has a note A, and note A says, what is note A? There it is. Equipment is considered to be in the normal operating condition if all of the conditions of 110.2b, exception number 1, are satisfied. So there's the tie that you can have an arc flash event, and you in determining the likelihood of an arc flash event, you have to go back and say, have I met all of those requirements in that section, in that exception? And condition of maintenance is in a few of those uh,
Yes.
points.
So the proper maintenance on electrical equipment comes up several times
Yeah.
throughout the document in NFPA 70E. And it really is all tying back to this concept of, even though what I have to do with that equipment is just exactly what the manufacturer designed it to do,
Yep.
if we're not meeting this list of things, then there's a potential increased risk of arc flash injury, even though no covers are open. No covers are
Yeah,
open. I don't have
that's
any,
right.
I'm just doing
Yep,
what I'm supposed to do with that. But
that's
I
right.
increase the level or the chance that something goes really terribly wrong because I
Yeah.
haven't kept it in that normal operating condition.
Yeah, because I know I've heard the debate in the past of like turning a circuit breaker on and off with the dead fronts on and everything together. Do I have to dress? And dressing would mean, do I think that there's a likelihood of an arc flash event? And what it tells you in that section, it says uh, expand table. It says abnormal, because that would be an abnormal condition. And it says, what does it say? Operation of a circuit breaker or switch the first time after installation or completion of maintenance in the equipment. That'd be an abnormal type of situation. Whether it doesn't matter the condition, you would have an electrical hazard. But where is the abnormal? Voltage testing, removal of installing covers, opening a panel board, removal of battery, maintenance testing, insertion remove. I thought there was something in here that talked about operating. Oh,
Yeah, it's down towards the bottom of the table there. It says operating a switch, circuit
yeah.
breaker, contactor, motor starter.
But it says
Normal.
operation of a circuit breaker, switch, contactor, or starter. It has normal and it says no arc flash hazard. But so if it's not in a normal situation, meaning I haven't met all of that criteria, now it's abnormal, then the likelihood of an arc flash event could be there.
Could be a yes, yeah. And
Right.
that's really what that table is about. And the yes and the no kind of is holdovers from when that used to be a table on whether or not I needed PPE, arc flash PPE.
Right.
And I'd really like to see it kind of shift more to a higher low level. Like if it's an abnormal condition, my likelihood of occurrence is high. Whereas if it's in a normal operating condition, my likelihood of occurrence is low. Is it ever zero?
Yeah, good point.
No,
Good
but it's
point.
the risk level is low enough that we're not going to tell the manufacturers as a safety world. We're not going to tell the manufacturers we don't trust your equipment to be able to do what it's supposed to do safely if we've done all the stuff that you recommend we do.
You
right?
know,
And
I
so,
like that.
this is why it's so important as a part of an ongoing maintenance procedure
Mhm.
to assess this thing,
That's right.
and because, I'll give you a great example where I think this is going to be fantastic for safety, even though it's in 70B. Um, if I take a maintenance or just a tech at a industrial manufacturing plant, um, they may be an electrician, they may not be an electrician, doesn't really matter. But I've noticed that if I ask them to do things like, can you tell me if that equipment was properly installed? Or, what's been done to maintenance to it? And I just go down that list of normal operating condition stuff. There's a lot of pieces on there, especially when you get to the new bullet point for 2024, which was rated for the available fault current.
Oh, yeah.
They really struggle with the assessing that piece. So this allows the equipment owner to really make an assessment of almost all of that prior to the tech being in front of the equipment.
Yeah.
And so at the time the tech goes in front of it, really what they got to look at is, are the doors and covers closed and secured the way they're supposed to? And then is there any outward signs of evidence of impending failure, something like overheating conductors, noise coming from a piece of equipment that's not supposed to come from it? Those kind of, as a qualified person, the things that give you a kind of butterflies in your gut when you walk up to electrical equipment. And that's really, it simplifies it and makes it kind of a better approach to that normal operation conversation
Right.
than before, when it was just like, okay, the qualified person does this assessment of normal operating condition.
Yep. And you know what? I think that this section that says that speaks to 4.2, yeah, and that speaks to condition of maintenance is related to 9.3, which is titled Equipment Condition Assessment, because I think what you would want to do as you look through your equipment and you do the condition is it I guess condition of maintenance is the state of condition of that equipment. I would have to assess the state of condition, which in 9.3 tells me I can have an equipment physical condition of 1, 2, or 3, and it gives me those criteria. So
Yes.
I think that uh, the 4.2.3 says that my maintenance program has to have elements to consider the current condition of maintenance, and 9.3 gives me my 3 categories that I need to put my equipment in after I've ascertained the condition of that equipment.
Yeah, well, and the
Yeah.
big reason for doing that is because that's going to drive my intervals in which I need to maintain my equipment, right?
Yes.
And I really love, the more I've been playing with 70B, is I really love the way this came together as a concept to say, okay, assess your equipment, and really you're going to manage it almost as assets, right? And so for each asset, I'm going to be tracking information along the way. And so
Yeah.
that's where we have to start with that initial kind of gap analysis to see, how close are we to being where we're supposed to be. Then we'll do this condition assessment so we can get those types of conditions. And there are three of them. There's condition 1, 2, and 3, but there's also physical condition, criticality condition, and operating environment condition, that come along with it. So that's a whole nother piece. We'll have to do a different episode to go down that road, because
Yeah.
that can get kind of complicated. But and then there's also this condition of assessment, or sorry, condition of maintenance assessment that 70E is asking us to do from a risk assessment standpoint. And really, when you look at it, you can essentially hit three key points all with this one assessment or inspection that you're going to do, kind of at the initial stage. And then you get a starting point, you can schedule your intervals. And then really after that, it's just about checking up on this stuff and making sure, okay, after we run a complete maintenance cycle, what information do we get out of that next one based on the condition of the equipment? So maybe we got a condition 3, which is kind of the
Hmm.
tightest set of intervals, and maybe on some of this stuff it's going to have us do it every year. So maybe we go one cycle, a 12-month cycle, and we do our maintenance and we see, hey, this is still in good condition, and then so we do another cycle and we
Right.
get the same results. So then we can start kind of backing off on this condition because we've established a pattern now that the maintenance, that equipment has a good condition of maintenance for us. So this really here, I mean,
Yeah.
if I had to, I know I'm a self-proclaimed Annex Q fan club president in 70E, but if I had to make a fan club for 70B requirements, I think this is the one I'd latch onto right here, is that assessing the condition of the equipment.
You know what? And I like the way you said that because I think 423 has to change. It's not condition of maintenance, it's the condition of equipment. Because
Correct.
I could argue that, well, my maintenance is good. I clean things. I do, you know, I'm not supposed to be establishing the condition of my maintenance. It's the condition of the equipment, right? And
Yes.
in fact, 9.3 is titled Physical Condition of Electrical Equipment. So I think that that section title should change, and I think it should say condition of equipment, and I think it should say the EMP shall include elements that consider current condition of electrical equipment and systems, not condition of maintenance of electrical equipment, because it's not about the maintenance, it's about the condition of the equipment, regardless of how well or not you're good at doing maintenance. It's about the equipment.
Boy, I do have to say I'm glad to hear you've passed the torch to new
AJ,
blood, because you're
yeah.
getting too hung up on words, man.
Oh, I tell you what, though. Here's the thing. You know what? And somebody else made that statement to me. Oh, maybe somebody else made that a similar statement to me. When you, I always look at it and say, if you're on the stand, if you're on the witness stand, and if I read these words and let's say I didn't follow it, let's say that I misinterpreted it, and I said
Yeah.
my maintenance is impeccable. The equipment looks like crap, but man, when I'm doing
I
maintenance, I
I
am
do
top
everything I'm
notch.
supposed to do.
I,
Yeah.
I do. I'm just like top notch when I'm doing
Yep.
maintenance of equipment. So, but then the 9.3.1, you have condition 1, which where it appears like new. The enclosure is clean. You don't have moisture intrusion. There's no unaddressed notifications. There's no active recommendations from predictive technologies or previous maintenance. And then condition 2 is maintenance results deviated from the past results and indicate that you need more frequent maintenance. Previous cycle revealed issues regarding the repair or replacement of major equipment components. And there's notifications from the continuous monitoring systems that you have issues that need to be addressed. And then there are active recommendations from those predictive techniques. And then condition 3 is you missed the last 2 successive maintenance cycles, so you haven't been doing your job. You have the previous 2 maintenance cycles revealed issues requiring the repair or replacement. There's an active unaddressed notification, and there are urgent actions identified from predictive techniques. So you are basically looking at putting all of your equipment in one of those 3 buckets, and to your point, that helps you ascertain the frequency of maintenance.
Right.
I like it.
Now, I also want to point this out there too. Now,
Mm.
I know it says language in there like, the previous 2 cycles of maintenance have been missed. That could be just you purchased the building and you have no idea what the previous owner did for maintenance, and so you
Ooh.
don't know. You don't know if they were completed or they were missed,
Well,
and
if you don't have a record, it didn't happen.
it didn't happen. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And people who, and I think there's a lot of equipment owners out there that are like this, where they've done maintenance things, but
Hmm.
it was they were just doing some stuff that they were told they need to do, or maybe they're following manufacturer's instructions and they didn't have a standard like 70B in their back pocket that say, hey, you have to document all this stuff. And they had that one like senior guy, and he knew everything about the plant, and maybe he came from the last owner of the plant, and so he just knew all this stuff.
Yeah,
But you kind of brought up the lawyers already, so it's fair game, and I
sure.
just recently finished a 4-day deposition on a case.
Wow.
So if it isn't documented, it's pretty hard to prove it ever happened.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
And you can get Joe Schmo who thinks that he remembers that they've done it, but then all you need to do is say, "All right, Joe, what did you have for breakfast 3 days ago?" I have no clue. How can you remember
Right.
the
Right.
maintenance, right? You can shoot
Yeah.
holes in any of that. So, all right. So, condition of
Yeah.
maintenance very critical, and all of your equipment needs to be. You need to ascertain the condition for all of your electrical equipment and systems.
Absolutely. You ready to jump onto the EMP principles?
I sure as heck am, baby.
All right. So this I think, in my view, this is where 70B gets as close to Article 110 in 70E as far as the structure of what the safety program versus the maintenance program need to look like.
Okay.
So and it even kind of nods its head to that, right, in 4.2.4.1, and says the EMP shall be designed to function in conjunction with the applicable electrical safety program. So
Yep.
so it's going to spell out how that relationship needs to work. And then it's got what I've got 9 items here of things that the maintenance program has to include, and that's going to be items like that maintenance condition assessment. um, Look at item number 2. This is one I think a lot of people, when they start to go down the road of compliance to 70B, they're going to realize, shoot, we don't have the personnel to do this. Because that
Yeah.
item number 2 says that the maintenance program has to identify the personnel responsible for implementing each element of the program. So
And
we haven't really touched on it yet, but this is all going to include a role within an organization called the Electrical Maintenance Program Coordinator, EMP Coordinator. And that's going to be somebody who's going to be in charge of implementing this whole thing. Um, we don't spell that out necessarily on the safety side of things, although I think we should. We
yeah.
should have a safety manager. But 70B, and I like this because it's going to have a dedicated role to say, look, we need to have somebody in charge of making sure this stuff gets done.
Yeah, and you know what they so in the it could be that you hire somebody external to your organization. So it could be that
Absolutely.
you've identified a resource, which is Joe Schmuckatelli's maintenance
Right.
services or whatever. Now in the next edition, they added they replaced, or they didn't, they put a new number one in and they shifted everything down, I
Okay.
think. They added input addressing the condition of maintenance and impact on electrical safety. So that was what we were just talking about
That
above.
was just what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then they also added 11, which is where industrial control systems or operational technology is not limited to a direct connection through a local non networked interface, risk assessment of the operational technology cybersecurity. So they added cybersecurity to these EMP principles to make sure that you include some assessment of cyber. That's pretty good.
Okay. So you've got this, is that the second draft or the first draft pulled up?
That is the second draft. Yep.
So, so are they asking us to assess our cybersecurity system
Now
for
the
protection of documentation and maintenance programs?
here's what the committee statement says. The revision and associated annex adds operational technology (OT) cybersecurity as an element that must be included in the EMP to ensure network connected equipment is maintained for cybersecurity.
Ah, so they're saying they're adding IT equipment to equipment that needs to be maintained.
Networked, so I could have a circuit
Yes.
breaker that is networked onto the web. It would
Hmm.
have to be maintained for cybersecurity, meaning I need to make sure that it hasn't been compromised and it's still
So
secure.
so doesn't that also apply though to the cybersecurity measures that you've taken, needing to make sure that that is being maintained? Like if it's a subscription service to a cybersecurity contract, that the
Sure.
bill gets paid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, I mean, I would say this also pulls in even outside of the electrical side. If I have a risk of somebody standing in front of that equipment and, you know, putting in a like say I have a computer in my room that controls all of my equipment. If I have to manage and the access to that computer, physical access, because it's not
Right.
just threats coming in over the wire. It could be that, look, you have equipment that can be accessed locally. You have to have a good security provisions in place to make sure that only qualified and authorized personnel are in these various areas within the facility, you know? So it can that little statement brings in a lot of it. It
It's
has
going to be a
little
big one.
fingers. I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Um,
So you have electrical safety program, you have the identification of personnel, you have survey and analysis of electrical equipment and
I think that
systems.
goes right along with the condition of maintenance
Yeah.
piece. Yeah. Um, ooh, look at number 4. We've got documented maintenance procedures. Now, this has been a question that comes up very often. So, do we say things like in our maintenance program? Are we going to say things like IR scans performed every on an annual basis, or are we going to come up with a specific list based on an asset to say, okay, here's switchgear LV-001, here's all the things that needs to be done for maintenance and how often they need to happen, and document that specific maintenance tasks and timetable for that specific piece of equipment.
Yeah, I mean, you could, for example, I could have, I'm going to get out of the electrical world. I could have
Yes.
my I could have a Jeep Rubicon. I could have a Ford F-150, and the instructions or the manufacturer's maintenance materials for each of those could be different. So
Right.
I could sit down and say, because it says develop and documented maintenance procedures for equipment. My maintenance procedures for the F-150 will be different than the maintenance procedures for the Rubicon, which will be different than the maintenance procedures for my Kubota tractor. And I would go to the manufacturer's information. So, yeah, every piece of equipment could be different based upon the smorgasbord of products that you have in your facility.
Right. Now we're starting to peel back a little bit of the layers of the onion here on this maintenance program
Yeah.
piece, because it's not, this is where it starts to separate a little bit from an ESP, right? Because I can write work practices and kind of keep them generalized based in an ESP, but in the EMP, we really need to get down to the nitty gritty on specific items. And what I really like about how they drafted up the later part of the book
Oh, yeah.
is they started separating it by kind of asset class, right? So circuit
Yeah.
breakers get their own chapter, whereas the switch gear that the circuit breakers installed in has its own chapter. and transformers are separate, and rotating equipment, and so they really kind of broke it up based on that, so that we can see that we need to almost essentially um, sort of build out an asset management program and incorporate the different rules into, or the different requirements and timetables into that asset management program based on the principles we're going to set forward in our written EMP,
Well,
right? So like,
just think about all of the different components that are in a power system. I mean, I could probably lump all molded case circuit breakers into one because every
right,
manufacturer is pretty much the same. But when you get to like switchboards and switchgear, but I guess a facility probably doesn't have thousands of switchboards and switchgear. They have
right.
a lot of panel boards, and they're probably all the same type of panel board. And the panel board is, I doubt the maintenance on all the panel boards. So to your point, your maintenance program would have all this stuff up front, talking about who's going to do the maintenance and all your contracts and all that other good stuff. But it's somewhere in your maintenance program, you're going to have a tab that says panel boards, a tab that says
Yes,
molded case circuit breakers, fuses, and then maybe you have Eaton Motor Control Centers, and another one that says Siemens Motor Control Centers if they're different. So you might have to identify the different components, but I can see that program, that EMP, could be a pretty thick document.
or computer program. It's a pretty big file on your computer to
It would be
be
yeah.
realistic, and so when you're tracking this stuff, this program's giving you indications that, hey, your Eaton low voltage power circuit breakers are coming up due for maintenance, and so at that point, your written piece is you hit print on that asset, and it prints out what is due for maintenance based on the duration and the timetable stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so so this really isn't, it's not a cut and dry
Mhm.
piece. Well, although I could argue the electrical safety program isn't cut and dry either, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to this maintenance program it's gonna take a kind of, I don't want to call it re-education of the industry, but it really is going to take a redefined approach. We're not just going to plug and play the same approach we took to safety on this maintenance piece, because it's a much bigger animal.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that absolutely. It's a
Yeah,
beast. And then
yeah.
you have plan of inspections, servicing, and suitable tests. That's pretty straightforward.
That's my timetables, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And then what you're doing in those timetables, right? So some equipment, because of the condition, you might have to do something more frequently, and you may have to do more extensive maintenance because of the condition and the
right,
location.
right. Oh, and don't forget the criticality.
Oh, that's right, the criticality. And you know what? We had this debate on what is criticality, and I wonder what they ended up doing with that because we said what was in there before was criticality to the business. Like if this machine goes down, I lose $10 million a day. Maintenance of that is a higher priority, not because of safety, but because of process. And the way the language was in there before, I could not make mandatory language out of that. So uh,
Right.
we we made it pretty generic. But
So did you back off on, because one thing I struggle with, and I think I heard this in the discussion at the 70B committee meetings, was, so criticality of equipment really got assessed based on, okay, if failure of the equipment, how critical would that be to safety of people within the facility, right? And so
hmm
so I initially took that to mean, okay, I have a piece of equipment, and let's say it's a chlorine gas detection system.
yeah,
And if that fails, I could have a chlorine gas leak that would injure all my people in the facility. So to me, failure of that equipment is not an option. So I need to assign the most stringent maintenance requirements to that equipment because I don't want a failure of that equipment to happen because it's going to lead to injury of people. However, I heard some discussions around, well, if this equipment fails, people are going to get injured because it's going to cause an arc flash. And that's pretty much all of our equipment. So wouldn't
Uh-huh.
criticality almost always be at that condition number 3? Because an arc flash at this equipment would get somebody hurt. And and uh and I can see valid
Yeah.
t-
Yeah.
talking points on both sides of it. You know, did they change that for the upcoming? I don't have.
I'll tell you what they
Well, I
did.
don't even. Is the second draft out yet, or are you
Yeah.
using your super
Yeah.
secret committee
No,
member
no, no,
powers to
it's
see it?
it's available.
Okay.
So what they did in 9.2.2 for criticality condition of equipment, remember before it said criticality condition 1 or criticality condition 2 shall be permitted to be assigned where the failure of the equipment or system will not endanger personnel. Period. So they changed that to say criticality condition 1, criticality condition 2, or criticality condition 3 shall be permitted to be assigned based on operational reliability or business continuity concerns. So I remember we had this business continuity, and the way the language was before was if it was high, medium, or low, and we can't
Right.
enforce that. Now they've established a critical 1, 2, or 3. They left the operating environmental condition, that's environmental, but they don't have a criticality condition 1, 2, and 3. I don't have a they don't tell me what criticality condition 1, 2, or 3 is. Uh, that's interesting. In fact, they went, um, that's really, we
Uh-oh.
never had it.
You're sparking the code nerd gears.
We never had it in the past either.
I'm
And
pulling
I'm,
up the
I'm intrigued now because
now I've
even
got to
before,
go digging.
yeah, you're going to go digging. So even in the operating environmental conditions, we put in operating environment condition 1 or 2, but I don't have an operating environment condition 1 or 2. I have if equipment physical condition 1 and 2, and I have 5 items that explain what that is. But we don't have any guidance on what is considered criticality condition 1, 2, or 3.
So,
Maybe it's in the there's a star,
oh,
so maybe it's
or
in
maybe
the.
it's employer's choice or equipment owner's choice.
You know what? Here it is. It says some examples of the type of personnel. Well, it says criticality assessment teams should be comprised of personnel who are familiar with the electrical equipment, safety requirements, operational capabilities, potential impact of downtime, and it gives you what type of people those are.
So
But it
you're
doesn't.
looking in the annex material.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't tell you what is a criticality condition 1, 2, or 3, like we do with physical conditions
Right.
1, 2, and
Well,
3.
and in even in the 23 edition of 70B,
Yep.
um, it told you condition 1 or 2 can be assessed where it's not a danger to personnel, and then um, but condition 3 had to be assigned where failure of the equipment or system will endanger personnel. So it defined 3, but it didn't really define 1 or 2. It was kind of up to the equipment owner to say,
That's right.
yeah, well, this is a 2, you know. So that's interesting. Now,
That's right.
I am looking, and so I'm only able to get to the first draft on 70B.
Oh, okay.
I know the second draft meeting has occurred, but the posting date for the second draft is October 3rd,
Gotcha.
which now I know the staff liaison who runs this committee pretty well.
Mhm.
having worked in the office next to him for several years. He's pretty good about getting this stuff out
Yeah.
sooner than the posting date on it. So I am I am looking forward to this. I'll have my fingers crossed. Maybe I'll get the trifecta here. We'll get the NEC coming out, and then like in the same week, I'll get second draft of
Yeah.
70B. And
I
so I'll
and
just be able to
yeah.
like lock myself in my office and code nerd out on this
Yeah.
on NFPA stuff.
That was another reason why I was happy to give up 70B because it's right over top of the NEC cycle. And I'll tell you what, with my
Yeah.
schedule, I would not be able to perform in this committee because there's no way one person can do all of that. But I think there's an opportunity for a change to clearly identify both criticality condition 1, 2, and 3 of equipment and operating environment conditions because we don't have good clarity on what is considered condition 1, 2, or 3.
Well, in the words of my
I
one of my
know.
favorite mentors ever, Mr. Mark Early,
Yeah.
we look forward to your public input, sir.
Amen, brother. I'll do that next cycle. It's on top of my list.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So that was development document maintenance. That was plan of inspection, maintenance, equipment, personal documentation. What were we? We were just doing. What were we doing? Trying to see
We were
where we
having
were.
fun is what we were
Yeah,
having
I
fun
know.
is what we were doing.
We
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Well, that was the plan of inspection, servicing, and suitable
Yes.
tests. Because yeah. So,
Yep.
all right, that was 5.
Yep.
Item 5.
And then another item number 6 there is it has to have a records retention policy. Now, how often do you suppose they are? How long do you suppose would be a good time frame to hold on to documentation as it applies to maintenance?
So here's my thoughts. I know what I've told people. Like when we do shift gears, whenever we do strategies, whenever you put a strategy in for a business, we always talk a 5-year strategy. When it comes to codes and standards that only changes every 3 years, equivalent 5-year strategy on codes and standards is 15 years. Okay.
Right.
Because of the cycle. So I would say your record retention policy should reflect the interval requirements for maintenance because some of the maintenance intervals, if I look in chapter 9, frequency of maintenance, section 9.3, some of these are every 5 years that you have to perform maintenance. So if you said I have a 5-year retention policy, the moment you do it, 5 years, you're throwing away the only test that you had.
Right.
So I
Right.
think I think you're probably if I said you should maintain 5 years of a records for anything, 5 years would be 25 years for an equivalent test that's done or assessments that are done every 5 years.
Every 5 years. Yeah, and the reason I asked that question too was because I think this brings up an interesting one. In my experience as doing electrical safety audits and going and helping customers out with that, um, a lot of the attitude towards document retention is, well, we'll hang on to it until the next audit, and then once
Hmm.
the next audit comes, we get a new set of information,
No.
and we can get rid of that old one, right?
Yep.
With exception of training documentation, because training documentation needs to be maintained for the duration of employment, right? But but this brings up an interesting piece because we're going to track maintenance on equipment, and we're going to have the potential to be able to graduate to kind of better conditions of that equipment after we've established several cycles where the maintenance is. So if you get rid of that after you get to the next maintenance cycle, you're losing all that test information you had from the previous test. And how do you track the consecutive cycles with good results?
But is
So
there
I
a requirement to track that? If you think about this, remember this is a bare minimum, right?
right.
So you may say, like I do with my vehicles, I maintain all of the records and I keep a vehicle forever. I can maintain all the records until I sell or get rid of that vehicle. And sometimes a few of them that I've had in the past, they ended up in a dump because that's probably all they were worth when I got done with them, right? So, but the question would be, if there's no requirement in 70B that you have to perform that trending, that you have to maintain it, the the mindset of I'm going to keep that last record, and when I make the new record, I'm throwing everything else away. If there's no requirement that you can't do that, or there's no prohibition that you can't do that, then you're following the bare minimum requirements
Right.
of 70B.
Right. So this is where education to the EMP coordinator and the people who are implementing
Yeah.
this program, to really understand the way this is structured. And if I go back to chapter 9, which we've kind of already established is a pretty important chapter in
Hmm.
in the life of, or the whole maintenance program development, right? Um, if I look at section 9.1.2, well, even just 9.1 9.1.2.1.2. Thank you, NFPA manual of style as opposed to the NEC style manual. But if I go to this section, it says if two or if more than two inspections are completed without requiring additional service, the equipment owner shall be permitted to resume the original inspection period. So let's say I'm in that situation where I buy a facility and I don't know the previous maintenance because they were of the mindset when they get to the next maintenance cycle, they can throw the documents away.
Yep.
And so I get this facility, I don't know what's been done to it, so I got to instantly default to the worst case scenario. So I'm doing maintenance every
Yeah,
year.
I could just hear somebody saying, "That's your problem, not mine." You know, I and
Right.
I highly doubt in the negotiations someone said, "Oh, I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z additional maintenance, so it's going to cost me more. So
Well, but
you need to lower the price."
remember my hypothetical, Tom,
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah,
where there's 4 degrees of separation between the people who are running the maintenance program and the people who own the building.
yeah.
Now, the own the building people may sell it off because it's just numbers on a spreadsheet to them.
That's right.
And the people getting it, they never sat down at a table and talked to them about, well, what have you been doing on maintenance on your switchgear? Like they never sat down and had that conversation.
No.
So so it's important, and you see here in the intervals chapter in chapter 9, it's important that we follow this. And even and I know my friends in the petroleum industry, they rely on this next statement pretty heavy because then they say 9.1.2.2, if more than two inspections are completed without detecting equipment problems, the maintenance cycle shall be permitted to be extended to longer intervals than listed in the table.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah,
in that table, the most of the stuff is, if it's like new condition or condition 1, it's a 5 year. If it's middle of the road, condition 3, it's a 3 year, or condition 2, it's a 3 year. If it's condition 1, it's 12 months. And so even a 5 year unit shutdown at an oil refinery, it's not realistic.
no,
So they're really good on the maintenance side of keeping this stuff up to date so that they can hit the intent of 9.1.2.2 to say, look, we can extend this out to a 7 year interval, because that works better for our business continuity, and we can verify because they, when you talk about documentation, they've got it in spades,
yep,
and they've documented and kept that and retain those documents. So if somebody were to ever question them, they could say, well, look, here's 5 cycles out with
yep.
no problems. So 7 years is perfectly fine based on 70, and we're still within compliance.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of value to keeping and honestly, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know how you would do this for I don't know how you would do this for a relatively medium to large size facility without a software application, for goodness sakes, to keep track of
Yeah.
all these records. I mean,
Yep.
you could put it in documented in, Even oh man, there's gotta be some tools out there to help with maintenance and tracking your maintenance to be able to identify what needs to be worked on next, and when you can leverage this thing to say, look, because here's the issue, Derek. If I've got a facility and I have thousands or tens of thousands worth of electrical components, you're going to need to prioritize what are you going to work on this week. And
Right.
if you can't ascertain what has already been maintained, what still needs to be maintained, and anytime you can say, look, I can extend the maintenance cycle on this equipment because of X, Y, and Z, because of these last two intervals, if I can leverage that history and extend it on the portions of my power distribution system, that frees up resources to go focus on where they need to be focused on.
Right. And so 100% software is going to be a component of this. And I've been doing a lot of research into a lot of different software programs, starting to develop. I'm whittling it down to a couple favorites I got, but the big industrials that have a good handle on maintenance already, they do have software programs to run this stuff, and it
Sure.
tracks timetables, it tracks their asset. They can even incorporate their arc flash studies information into it, and
Yeah.
manufacturing data and stuff. And so
Yeah.
so they've got that, they've got that in place already. Where my big concern lies with
Mm.
is tied into safety as maintenance is. What are the small to medium industrial world that's been, their approach to maintenance is, we'll change the light bulb when it burns out.
I
Now,
know.
you know, and
Yeah.
so this is going to be, it's going to be a pretty monumental task, and I'm glad so far. I mean, we've got a lot of interest in 70B that's been coming out,
Yep.
but the floodgates haven't really opened yet, 100%.
No.
Um, and I've said this at several presentations. I'm really worried that between now and when we get the framework to be able to act as consultants in this space, between now and when that happens, um, there's an injury or something that's directly pointed to lack of maintenance, and then OSHA gets involved, and insurance companies get even more involved than they already are. And so, and that is something we've been looking at from a consulting standpoint, because
Sure.
I mean, you mentioned it before. If an employer doesn't have the knowledge and the resources to be able to do this and manage it
Yeah.
effectively,
Yeah. Oh yeah. What are they going to do? I
what are
mean,
they going to do?
you're flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
can't walk in today and go, well, I think I'll start over in that side and work my way east to west in the structure. You can't do that because, and we just had a 70E class. Whenever somebody is establishing an electrically safe work condition, they're going to open a breaker or a fuse or a disconnect. They're going to lock and tag it out. They have to ascertain the condition of maintenance of that equipment. They're doing a portion of a 70B maintenance program. And if you can register that and take credit for it,
Right.
you can pepper in all of this to say, look, I've operated that equipment. I've already looked at it because we were doing energized work or we were establishing an electrically safe work condition. So you've gone through the process of looking at various pieces of equipment. No need to look at it again because you already did. But if you don't maintain that record and don't have that information,
Right.
you're going to be doing the same work twice, and you can't afford that.
Well, who can? Who can? I
Nobody can.
mean,
Yeah,
and why would we want to, right?
that's
This is
exactly
this
right.
is about efficiency and reliability and safety, and I think we can blend them all three in the same space. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, and it's funny too, because I think the next bullet point in the elements of an EMP talks about a process to prescribe, implement, document corrective measures based on collected data. So again, back to that, collecting data and documenting it
Yeah.
and keeping it. We need to have that ongoing process, and the software systems are going to what's going to allow us to be able to do that. And
Eh, You don't have collected data if you threw it away.
right, right,
So
and
that's the requirement that I was looking at. Okay, I'm with you.
Yep. And so we're also looking to one thing I've been kicking around is like the idea of QR codes that tie to on the equipment that tie to the maintenance software and saying, okay, so the tech with their phone or the iPad or some sort of scanner or something like that, they go out there to operate that circuit breaker for lotto reasons, right?
Right.
And they do that little assessment of the equipment at that time. And if they find something, they can quick scan that QR code, enter in what they found, and it immediately gets populated into the software. And I've found software out there that can take that data and that information, that those little inputs, and they can incorporate it into the existing information on the equipment and say, it's got AI working in the background to say, okay, look, this point of a touch point with the equipment just happened. This is what
Hmm.
was reported to from it. How does that change our intervals in our process?
Sure.
And so there's some really cool things out there that are, and when I'm looking at it from a consultant standpoint, it's one thing if I just had one facility to focus on. Now, if
Oh,
I'm
right.
doing this for 20 clients,
Or yeah, or you
like
have, yeah.
that's a full-time job. I can kiss training goodbye
Oh,
at that
absolutely
point
right.
because I'm
Yeah.
going to be so busy kind of managing this, and we're going to be able to do this effectively. We have to have software tools that can, and the use of AI is really growing in this space to be able to effectively kind of drive this stuff.
Boy, you just dropped the AI bomb. I never thought about that. If you could feed data, especially if you had continuous monitoring data,
Yes.
think about that. If you had your continuous thermal monitoring, if you had humidities and temperatures and activity to know that that breaker or that disconnect was just opened and closed and it does its magic, oh man, you could have
Well, and then
AI generate your work instructions for the
right,
next week.
and two, you know what? Somebody be thought about this. So let's go back to chapter 9 again.
Yeah.
And I believe there's 9.1.1.2. Continuous monitoring or predictive techniques shall be based on, well, that's the manufacturer's instructions recommendations. Oh, sorry, 9.1.1.1, right? Yeah. 9 and three
Yeah.
ones. Yeah, so
Yeah.
continuous monitoring or predictive techniques shall be permitted to be used as a consideration when determining maintenance intervals.
Yeah.
So
So if
they
you
can be continuously feeding your maintenance software
absolutely.
information, and essentially you can wait for the little paperclip guy down in the corner of your screen to pop up and say, "Hey, look, you've got." I know I'm showing my age a little
Yeah,
bit here,
there's
but
probably a ton of people that are talking like, "What the heck? The paperclip?" They probably don't remember Windows 95 at all. I remember that little paperclip that used to sit down there in the
oh
corner.
man, that paperclip was. If the paperclip didn't show up, I didn't do it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yep, but they're waiting for
Yeah,
the maintenance program based on the input it's getting from the continuous and networked equipment. So
that's right.
you talked earlier about systems being important, and all of this is networked together and feeding information into the brains of the program,
Yeah,
and the brains of the program are interpreting it. Now we're getting somewhere, but that's if you've got this fancy new equipment.
that's right.
For the majority of facilities, it's still going to be, it's the, I don't want to call it dumb electrical equipment because it's certainly, there's a lot of technology in it, but it's not interconnected. There's no continuous monitoring. There's none of that stuff. And then that is when we go back to the maintenance program. One of the things that the maintenance program needs to have in it is an element that's going to incorporate design for maintainability in the electrical installations. So when we educate people right on what needs to be in this maintenance program and the importance of it, now we start to see some maintenance, safety by design, maintenance by design, prevention through design
Right.
concepts come into the fold. Because if you don't, if you aren't incorporating some of that stuff, you're going to be sitting there, and your calendar is going to pop up and say, "Hey, you need to do circuit breaker maintenance on this piece of equipment," and it's unfortunately going to be in the middle of a run, or you can't shut it
Yes.
down, and now you have a little bit of a crisis.
You know what? Yeah, okay, so this item 8, a process for incorporating design for maintainability in electrical installations. I have a desire, man. I've got to come up with a way to get the National Electrical Code to get off of trying to mandate maintenance. I think if you take a look at how 70E and the installation requirements work together, 70E requires proper space, working space.
Yep.
70 requires you to install proper space. I have lockout tagout provisions. 70 requires you to install, in some cases, locks to be able to lock and tag out devices. I have GFCI requirements for shock protection in 70E. I've got installation requirements for shock protection in 70. 70B and 70 have to work the same way. And this item right here dovetails and gives me a platform for that, because in my opinion, I'm working on my next blog item. I did a blog on comparing 70E and 70 and how they relate together. I want to do the same thing for 70B, and the example I would give you is in Article 700, where we have the mandate for installing a bypass isolation switch.
So you can maintain a generator.
Yes,
Yes.
and the transfer switch. So you have provisions. That's an installation requirement for a technology that facilitates maintainability. I
Yes.
I think the NEC can eventually no longer have to say you shall perform maintenance, because the NEC should be implementing design considerations or installation requirements that facilitate maintenance.
Right. Well, and that that goes all the way back to the start of 70B in the first place.
Yeah.
That's why 70B became a thing, because a lot of people were trying to get maintenance requirements into
Yeah.
the NEC, and the NEC committee said, "Time out. That doesn't belong here. Make your own standard for maintenance." Well, it became a recommended practice instead of a standard, but
Right.
we came full circle and we're finally there now. But yeah, and so it really is twofold. I mean, obviously, the Cadillac program is to do that interconnected, continuous monitoring things,
Yep.
but also, and it came up against this at the location where I was teaching last week. It was one of the national laboratories, and they do a lot of these really elongated science experiments. And
Oh
so
yeah.
the particle colliders and the photon accelerators and all that stuff that they run, it may run years on an experiment. And okay, if my maintenance program comes up in the middle of that and says, okay, I gotta yank this circuit breaker out
That's right.
to be able to do maintenance on it. Well, I can't just shut that down.
No.
And
Yeah.
and that experiment might get to its end on a Friday, and the next one starts up the
On
following
Monday.
Thursday, and they have no indication on how fast that's going to be. It might be 6 months, it might be 6 hours.
Sure.
And so how do you schedule around that? Well, if you created redundancy or an ability to be able to
That's right.
bring in an alternate source for it. In that instance, really, I mean, my recommendation was to start building this stuff out. So we've got parallel gear feeding it, so you can seamlessly switch over. And they have windows of, okay, if we lost power for 30 seconds, we'd still be okay. But so they can switch this stuff over,
Right.
and but they've got to have a design for that. And right now, currently, they don't, because there's all this stuff is still operating from when the lab was built back in the 40s and 50s.
Oh
And
wow.
so it's a difficult conversation, and I think we're going to run into very difficult conversations like that with the rest of the industry, because they didn't think of it.
Yeah,
They didn't think
absolutely
of it.
right. Yeah, you
You
never
know,
had that mindset. But if you have that mindset, like you said, you'll put some redundancy in so that you can sit down and say, all right, after we're done running this test, we're going to switch to this other feeder, and then we're going to take all this equipment down and we're going to recondition it. We're going to get, or maybe you don't have to recondition it. We're going to maintain it. But whatever you
Right.
have to replace, you replace. Whatever you have to recondition, you recondition, and you get a fine old machine again. And then you say, okay, when that test is done, we're going to move it back over here. And to your point, if that test took 5 years and now I'm ready to do maintenance of that other equipment, now you have a way to get it done.
Right.
If you don't plan ahead, forget it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and two, this one though, we got to be careful we don't oversell the fact that you have to install two electrical systems throughout your entire facility.
Well,
Right.
I know
It, it
you would only do it on that equipment that
yeah,
you have to, because
yeah. And
yeah,
the critical stuff, the stuff that you couldn't shut down,
sure.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you or stuff that you don't want to shut down,
Yeah.
because the fact is you're going to have to shut down to do maintenance on all of, well, on essentially all electric. Some of it you
Yeah.
just run till till the light bulb burns out and you change the light
Yep.
bulb. But you got to do some level of maintenance on just about everything, that every piece of electrical equipment. How critical is it to the reliability and the business operations piece? And you make a judgment call on that. And
Yep.
if it's something that would affect your business continuity, then that system should have an option to be able to supply it with minimal downtime.
That's
So
right.
like I got to take my generator offline and do maintenance and lubrication and all that stuff on it. So let's put in that hookup for a temporary generator to be brought in. You know, um,
Exactly.
and so it's not everything on the system. I
No.
don't need parallel premises wiring systems
No.
uh,
No.
to do this, but there's some pieces that would
Yeah, and if you're
require,
yeah,
you know?
like if you sat down and said, my production, this plant has to be up and running 24/7, 365, and I
Yeah.
can't have a planned outage for the entire facility. So you may put a double-ended switchgear up at your service equipment so you can feed off of one feed, take down the rest of the equipment and maintain your main breaker. And then after you've
And then
maintained that
swap.
one, and then swap. So
Yep.
there may be, and if you just look at it and say, okay, I have to take down my facility and I lose X millions of dollars every minute I'm down, that would justify the equipment purchase, because you're avoiding downtime of your
Right.
entire facility. So
You know who's really good at this?
who?
Data centers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. They got UPSs, they got double-ended, they got multiple feeds, they got on-site
Yep.
generation. Yeah, that's a very good point. And they
Yep.
have to plan ahead because they are already thinking about all of those computers that they can't lose power to. So their
Yep.
mindset is there already. That's a
Yes.
good
And
point.
I saw a good placard at a data center I was at not too long ago in the training room, and it just said, figure out your how was it worded? I think it was something around the lines of, plan for maintenance of your electrical equipment, or your equipment will plan it for you.
Oh, that is so right.
Yes. Yep.
I like it. I like that. Okay, so that was 8, process for
That was 8.
incorporating.
Now
I love
the
that.
last one is how we maintain our program, right? This whole program's about maintenance. Well, the program itself needs maintenance too. So this is the program has to have elements in it that are going to have us review the document, do revisions to it. Obviously, if we gather data from an assessment that says, hey,
Yep.
you can extend this, or we need to shorten up maintenance intervals, we need to be able to edit that, because the software will help us do it kind of real time. Um, but we have to, almost just like the 3-year review of our ESP. Okay, we're going to need to do a program review of the EMP and make sure it's
Oh, yeah.
still operational and doing the best it can. Now, I don't remember, and I want to look. Here it is. If we jump down a little bit to 4.2.7, there's the EMP audit.
Yep.
And now I don't know why the EMP audit got put at a 5-year interval instead of a 3-year interval. Um,
Yeah,
Most
that's
of most
right.
of the times, the audits kind of coincide with the revision of the documents, but maybe this one is coinciding with the kind of the 5-year maintenance cycle that a lot of the equipment, if it's in condition one, is going to have. Um,
Yeah, you're
that one was a big question for me on that, but
yeah, in fact, the in 110.3 L auditing, it's every 3 years. Audits shall
for
be
safety
performed at
programs,
intervals not exceeding 3 years for a safety program, and to your point, that's because I mean, I could relate that to the document being updated
yes,
every 3 years.
yep. But I think this one is because the maintenance program is going to be based on the asset,
Yeah.
and the asset's maintenance cycles most likely going to be around 5 years for newer equipment or well maintained equipment. Maybe it sounded good when I came up with it,
It
Tom.
did no, it did, but I'm just and the only reason I was thinking that is because you said it's newer equipment, so if I have a condition 2 or 3, it's gonna be much more frequent than that. So
Right.
I guess it's okay. I mean, you should you should probably do, in my opinion, every time you do your safety program or your maintenance plan, every time you're implementing it, it doesn't matter if you've run through a process and you say, boy, my EMP wasn't as efficient on this, then you update it because you've just identified it. It's not like you sit down and say, "Oh, I can't do that, and I got to wait 5 years."
Right. Right.
Because it says
Well, and
not
it
to
does say
exceed 5 years.
not to exceed. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and
So
the other side of me, my brain says, well, maybe they just tied this to the audit on the arc flash study and say,
yeah,
okay, you're doing an arc flash study review your EMP at the same time,
yeah.
kind of
But
thing.
your arc flash study could be reviewed sooner than 5 years if you make significant changes to the facility.
It it absolutely could. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I tend to agree with. I think the 3 year thing would be better, or key it off of. I don't know. I don't know. I could hear arguments on both sides of that one.
I could too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have already.
Yeah. You've made
I have
arguments on
already.
both sides of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so
All right. So
how
that's
much more of
all
the
of
program?
well,
That's
we
all
have
of
to
the items in the
no,
program.
we didn't do EMP controls. Well, it says EMP shall identify the controls by which it is measured and monitored. I so to your point, I may not be able to say how would I measure and monitor it. That it could be that the facility establishes, look, we don't want equipment failures due to maintenance. That's one of our measurements, right?
Right, right.
We don't want downtime because of maintenance equipment failures due to lack of maintenance. You
Yeah, and
could
they could track essentially the reliability of their equipment
right. Yeah, exactly right.
and to
Yeah.
measure, is this program being successful or are we still missing something? You
Yep.
know, we're still burning out motors. Why are we burning out motors? You
That's
know,
right. And
yeah, absolutely.
you can measure it based upon, on dollars too. I mean, you obviously, I mean, I think the safety program should be measured on how many people get injured and things like that.
Correct.
But the
Correct.
maintenance program should probably be measured on downtime, failures due to a lack of maintenance or related to maintenance of equipment, things like that. So I think the controls, but to your point, it's a sentence and it doesn't give you much to work with.
Right. Right.
So
And I think, you know, usually when I see something as kind of high level as that is it's a performance based requirement in 70B.
yeah,
Say, look, you've got to come up with how you're going to track this program and measure its success and document that. And the reason that's going to be important is because when we do those reviews and we do those audits, we
yeah,
want to make sure that we are making progress in the right direction. Okay.
yep,
If we're doing the same thing over and over again and we're not getting any better at it, Well, that's the definition of insanity, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know
S-
what? The 4.2.6 incident investigations could be data for your controls for measuring and monitoring the performance of your EMP. So you have your safety incidents, your equipment malfunctions, your unintended operations or alarms, and your operation of protective devices. So,
Right. So that goes to your point beyond what the safety side was to
yeah,
say, look, we're not just tracking injuries, we're tracking downtime, we're tracking repair costs, we're tracking all the
exactly.
stuff that the CFO and the bean counters in the organization don't
Care
want to
about.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're quantifying at and then you just have to identify the controls by which it is measured. I agree. I think that that sentence needs to be, I can understand the performance, and I don't know. I'd have to think about EMP controls. I think 4.2.5 is really speaking to the performance of your electrical maintenance program and
right.
how you measure the success or failure of it, and how can you quantify it? But and then the incident investigations can feed into that. But that 4.2.5 is, let me see if it's changed. 4.2.5 EMP controls. The EMP shall identify the controls by which is measured and monitored. So it hasn't changed. So, and I'll bet you there weren't even any public inputs on it.
Probably
4.
not.
No, that's, it's little things like that that I think those are where the opportunities are to help improve the document by people who are implementing this to say, we've tried to implement 4.2.5. I can't figure out what an EMP control is, but I do measure and I do monitor my EMP program to tell you the success of it. And maybe those individuals can provide input to say, here, let's improve 4.2.5 and give some valuable input for others who are trying to implement 70B.
I like it. I like it. So
Man,
again, you said it a little bit more roundabout way, but you're just following Mark Early's guidance. We look forward to your public input, Derreck.
I
Yes.
love it. I love it. Absolutely. And really,
Now
that's it. Well, go ahead.
that's the maintenance program. Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what goes into it.
All right. I hope you got a lot out of that session with Derreck Vigstol. I don't know about you, the whole aspect of NFPA 70B is so critical from an electrical safety perspective, and I really appreciate Derreck taking the time out of his day to chat about the electrical maintenance program. And it complements our discussion from last year on the electrical safety program because 70B and 70E, just like the National Electrical Code, all three of those together, I call that the trilogy. They all work together to focus on electrical safety. So I really appreciate you staying in there for the end. And if you're watching this, then you are absolutely committed to electrical safety. So I hope you're enjoying Shock Week. I hope you're having a good, hope you're being a sponge. And hopefully the videos and the discussions that we have during this week are helping you out. Thanks again. And we will see you in the next Shock Week video. Stay tuned.